Hi, folks. This is Dr. Rob Sivers, the Carb Addiction Doc, and I just happen to be in a fun mood today. And I'm going to share kind of a fun story, but it's also important to think about it in the backstory. And this is on a buddy of mine who's just an absolutely wonderful guy by the name of Jerry Taubes, Jerry Taubes. You may have heard of him. He's an author. He's also a science writer and a scientist by virtue of his writing. And he and I had that discussion, and he actually corrected me. You can be a scientist by scientific writing. But Jerry Taubes is a phenomenal guy. Is his name Jerry Taubes? No, it's actually Gary Taubes, isn't it? Here's on you, Gary. Gary loves to call me Bob. It's always Bob. And I'm not some dinky little thing that floats in water. I'm Rob Sivers, so Jerry Taubes. Anyway, Jerry has a beautiful way of talking about dogma versus moderation. And this is in some of his earlier work, and I just thought that the concept was fascinating in that he talks about the fact that so many people preach eating in moderation, controlling yourself. And if moderation works for you, you've probably never been fat, or you've been deluded about the fact that you can control your diet through moderation. If moderation worked for everybody, it would be the ideal way to go. But if moderation worked for everybody, nobody would be fat or diabetic or sick, at least from their diet. So if you're preaching moderation because you can do it, what you fail to understand and fail to have empathy for your clients, for obese people, for type 2 diabetics, because the dogma of moderation has failed people like me, a fat guy, and my patients. Your dogma of moderation has failed. Because if we could live along with carbohydrates in moderation, we would. We cannot. Just like a heroin addict or an alcoholic is incapable of moderation, we no longer are. That dogma has failed. And to try to force us to control ourselves into that dogma because you can will always repetitively result in failure. And Gary speaks to that so incredibly well. But if you are a healthcare provider, if you are somebody who is trying to give, Michelle Michaels, trying to give other people advice based on your way of life, you are not good at what you do. You are not good at what you do because you fail to stand in their shoes and see what they are capable of. And I know I am incapable of moderation when it comes to carbohydrates. I am a carbohydrate addict. I am the carb addiction doc. So that is so important. And when it comes to addiction management, here's the next part of the story. Addiction management is very binary. Diets ask you to control your relationship with carbohydrates. Oh, you can have 30 grams. Oh, you can have 50. Oh, you can have net carbohydrates. That's like asking an alcoholic to only drink light beer. It is ludicrous. You're requesting control and moderation of somebody who has lost and never will have that capacity. You cannot control addiction. You have to abstain from it. So my world is very binary, as well as a surgeon. Surgical thinking is very binary. You either cut or you don't cut. You can't half cut. Ambiguity is not something that a surgeon should have. They should question, they should work things out, but we shouldn't have doubt. Most of the time we're right, sometimes we're wrong, but we shouldn't have doubt. And that's kind of how I've evolved. Now, is that the right place to be? I think it's important to be down that road, but not dogmatically so. But my authoritarian self comes out a little bit there. And for those authoritarians out there, understand that rigid structure, rigid rules, binary thinking has value from time to time in things like addiction, but it is also your greatest liability. And I just did the low carb San Diego discussion, low carb San Diego talk, and I gave a talk, and Gary gave a talk, and I went up and chatted with him, asked a question, and he pointed out something very important. It was a very, very important lesson for me to learn. And he and I discuss things in a group quite often on the internet, on an email chain. But what Gary said is he said, you often come up here and your statements are always dogmatic. Your statements are always absolutist. And he's right, they are. And sometimes that's appropriate. Most of the time it's not. He said when you're questioning science, science is about asking questions. Science is about probability. Science is not about absolute. And he's so right. And for those of you in this space that are absolutist in terms of your thinking, there are times when it has value in addiction management, and there are times when you really want to look at probability, because if you're absolutist, you find it very difficult to change your mind. If it's probable, if it's likely, if it's unlikely, if it's improbable, then what you're doing is searching for evidence to help you to make up your mind better. When you're absolute, you've already made up your mind. Now, I have to be absolute about my carbohydrate addiction, because if I'm not, that results in a relapse. If there's any doubt whether I can have a carbohydrate, I'm going to play that game and I'm going to fail and I'm going to relapse. So addiction management is binary. It has to be absolute. But in science, in evidence-based healthcare, that is not true. And Gary is so right. And I so respect him for correcting this. And I wanted to bring that to the attention of you folks. You want to take a position on something, but you want to take a position where you say, look, this is what I think is the case. This is probably correct, but let me gather evidence to support or denounce, to shift me one way or the other. If you're already locked in, no evidence is going to change you. And where did this come up about? In our discussions, it came about the fact that we want to do a study to look at a truly low-carb, high-fat diet in terms of helping people to prove that it is a healthy diet. But the people that we already believe that. Our position is already that it is highly likely, if not certain, that that is the healthiest way to live. And then there are people like the Chan School of Public Health at Harvard, which is a disgusting body of absolutism, that a plant-based low-fat diet is absolutely correct. And the reason I say that that is wrong is because they've bought into that theory absolutely, and they're dogmatic about it. And even though there's strong evidence that that theory is incorrect, so these large studies that they've done to prove the efficacy of a low-fat diet, that there has been no result. There's been absolutely no proof that a low-fat diet is better. And yet they refute that negative evidence because they're locked into their decision. I don't want to be locked into, and in fact, I've changed my position on a low-carb, high-fat diet because of the knowledge we have. I'm shifting back, not to this, but some of my other work will talk about LCHP versus LCHF. However, here's my battle with my own group. If we did a study that proved that low-carb, high-fat was the right, best diet for everybody, these folks are so locked into their ideology that no one positive study is going to change their minds, their insights, their ideology, because we have 5 or 6 major studies that were negative that didn't ask them to question the dogma. So I don't believe in my lifetime we are ever going to have the evidence from a study that proves or disproves this, and we're certainly not going to sway anybody. So what I've chosen to do is to work in the trenches with one individual at a time to say, here is an option. Here's what I see. I see you as a drug addict. And we use addiction methodology. But we are also open-minded. We are also open-minded to change. And a large part of the videos you're going to see coming out of me over the next little while is the fact that, yes, I changed from a standard American diet to an LCHF, low-carb, high-fat, ketogenic diet, but that is not the best way to be. I'm now shifting that pendulum a little bit more to the middle, and I have to keep an open mind about that. I know I cannot eat carbohydrates, but what should I eat? And that's where the doubt has crept in. That's where the ambiguity has crept in. And that's where our science has helped me to shift away from that. It's not okay to be high carb. It's not okay to remain high fat. And some of my videos in the near future will discuss why. Why it's better, once you've corrected some of the health issues, to shift to the middle, where we are cycling fat and protein as our primary energy sources in our meals. Because in that way, we restore the natural hormonal cycling in the human body between gluconeogenesis and ketogenesis. So this all started tongue-in-cheek a little bit with me pointing out some of the fun clashes I've had with Gary. But I'll tell you this, that Gary's latest book, which has probably been overlooked more so than some of his other books, his latest book is called The Case for Keto, and it is absolutely brilliant. So while he and I have these skirmishes and these battles, we are totally on the same page, and I've learned so much from him. I've modified who I am as a human being because of my interactions with him. I've modified my insights into other people in the space because of Gary, and I value his contribution tremendously. Please, 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 beg, borrow, buy, or steal, and Gary would say buy The Case for Keto and review it, because you will arm yourself with information. Do I agree with everything that's in there? No. Has it made me think? Has it made me change my opinion? Has it reinforced what I do? Absolutely. Educate yourself with the facts as we know them, and then question them and look for more evidence. And I thank Gary for working in this space. I'll talk to you soon, Jerry. Bye.